So thank you all for joining us for our second event of Canadian Agriculture Safety Week 2023. I'm Caitlin Croman and I'm here with Farm Safety Nova Scotia. And we are going to have a discussion, or I guess a presentation, from Sterling Kendall, a health and safety officer with OH&S. He is going to look at an overview of occupational health and safety in Nova Scotia for understanding your rights and responsibilities in the workplace. So if you have any questions throughout this presentation, there are a couple ways that you can ask them. If you raise your hand, I will see it and I will give you the opportunity to ask the question yourself. If you would like to have one of us read it, you can put it in the chat at the bottom, and there is also a Q&A function there as well. So both of those will get to us and we'll read your questions to Sterling. Other than that, I will let him take it away.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much, Caitlin, for the very nice introduction. Well, first of all, I just would like to introduce myself. My name is Sterling Kendall, and I am actually one of the safety advisors with the Occupational Health and Safety Division. I'm not actually an Occupational Health and Safety officer, although we do work very closely with them. So I'm one of two safety advisors, and our role is specifically to go out in terms of and provide awareness and outreach. So we'll provide education sessions such as the one that I will be presenting to you today. My session should take approximately 1 hour. I'm going to go through a range of materials, and I have some videos included as well that I'd like to share with you. And certainly definitely would like to hear your questions or whatever they may be. Whatever is easiest for you, I'm happy to stop and take them as we present, or we can certainly wait until the end of the presentation and go through them at that time. So without further ado, I'm just going to load up my screen here in my presentation, and we can get started. Sorry, does everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can see it. Okay.
Is that everybody can see that?
Yep, you're still good.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So today, in terms of our session objectives, there's a couple of things that we're hoping to cover today. Certainly, the intention here is to, first of all, to review the laws and regulations on occupational health and safety in Nova Scotia. So we're just going to discuss a little bit what those are and how they apply. An important aspect of the presentation, obviously, will be about understanding your rights and responsibilities as a worker, but also in your case as an owner and also as an employer. So we're just going to look at what some of those rights and responsibilities are. And then we're going to sort of go into a little bit more into about some of the information that you're required to know, but also the information that you're required to post. An important aspect of this is also how to report any safety concerns that you may have and how to contact the division in terms of reporting any issues that you might have. So what is the safety branch and what does the safety branch do? So I think the best way to get into that or to explain that is, first of all, just to start with a quick overview of the government of Nova Scotia. Now, I'm sure as most of you are familiar, there's, the government of Nova Scotia is made up of 19 different departments, which will deal with all different aspects and elements of working life in Nova Scotia. But specifically, one of these 19 departments is the Department of Labor, Skills and Immigration, of which the Occupational Health and Safety Division belongs. So this is sort of where we are located within government as a whole. This next slide here will show you sort of where we fall within that Department of Labor, Skills and Immigration. So the safety branch itself is one of several branches. We also share it with immigration and adult education. The safety branch, however, of course, is dedicated to occupational health and safety in Nova Scotia. The branch is quite broad. I believe we count anywhere from 50 to 100 employees spread out over several branches. The main branch is what you'll see on the left-hand side here, which is the operations. Operations is sort of made up of, this is all of the employees that will regulate the day-to-day affairs of occupational health and safety in the province. So the biggest section of, the biggest element here, I'm just going to use my pointer. The biggest section here is the inspection and compliance. This is made up of approximately 50 occupational health and safety officers, which are spread out across the province of Nova Scotia. They have, they either will respond to complaints and attend based on a response, but they also have the authority to proactively inspect workplaces. So I myself belong to awareness and outreach. We support inspection and compliance, but our goal is to provide awareness sessions to anybody who would require them. So typically it's small businesses, but we also have a lot of interaction with community organizations. We deal with education institutions such as Nova Scotia community colleges, high school, universities. So our intent is really to go out and provide these awareness sessions just to educate Nova Scotians about their rights and responsibilities under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Our main operational section also includes investigators. Now, this group would be called if there was a serious incident or fatality, and their responsibility would be to investigate and to look into whether charges are warranted based on the offense. But I also want to share the fact that we also have technical services. Now, this is made up of specialists. Typically, these would be occupational hygienists. They have advanced degrees in occupational hygiene, and they will often support the investigators or typically the officers in situations where those specific skills are required. So we have mining engineers, we have electrical engineers, we have mechanical engineers, in addition to the occupational hygienists. So that's just sort of our I guess those would be more the specialists within our branch. I also want to share that we also deal very closely with technical safety. Now, they're co-located with us. However, their responsibility is more specific around boilers and pressure equipment, electrical safety, cranes, elevators and lifts. I'm sure if ever you've been in an elevator here in Nova Scotia, you'll see a certificate which is issued by the technical safety branch, and also power engineers. Last but not least is the Office of Fire Marshal, which just as of, I think, April, they will be returning to us. They were previously in community services, but they will be returning to be co-located with us. So this, in a nutshell, is sort of an overview of the safety branch and all the different services that we provide, but also the different regulations that we will review and enforce. So this next slide, I'm just going to explain a little bit about the role of the Occupational Health and Safety Division. And the reason I think it's important to take the time to sort of explain that now is because I think historically there's been somewhat of a misconception that the Occupational Health and Safety Division's primary role was that of enforcing or regulating occupational health and safety. Of course, that's a huge aspect of what we do, but the division actually has a much broader function than that. In addition to regulating, we also improve understanding among businesses and workplace parties. Yes, we do have an aspect of enforcement, but also the role is to provide assistance and to encourage and conduct educational programs, such as the one that we're doing today. Now, this next slide is just an overview about the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Now, the important thing to remember is that the Act itself was created, I believe, in 96 it was passed. And the important thing is that it applies to all employers within the jurisdiction of Nova Scotia. So what that means is that with minor exceptions, the Act will apply to anybody conducting business here. What are those exceptions? Well, there's specific businesses that are exempt from the Act, and it's not that they're exempt from all requirements, it's just that they would fall under federal jurisdiction. And the best examples of those would be banking, would be interprovincial commerce, as well as transportation such as via rail or airlines. Those based on the Constitution Act, those are under federal jurisdiction, and we would have absolutely nothing to do with their regulation. However, we do maintain close working relationships with our federal counterparts, and if there's ever a situation where we're unsure who would have jurisdiction, there's always that discussion that can be had. So the important thing is that you understand who the Act applies to. And most importantly, when it was created, the intent of the Act was to provide an absolute mandatory minimum. So the idea was if you were to operate a business here in Nova Scotia, everybody would operate it to a specific mandatory minimum standard. So nobody, any employee entering whatever workplace in Nova Scotia could always expect or anticipate the same level of care and also the same kind of safety structure in place, regardless of where they work. Now, the Occupational Health and Safety Act is what we call the parent legislation. That act gives the framework and the groundwork for all the powers that the Occupational Health and Safety Division has. It empowers the different officers and the different employees in terms of what they are to do, but it also gives the division powers to enact regulations. And as I'm sure everybody's familiar, regulations essentially are the more specific and detailed laws and rules around a particular aspect or element of work. So here in Nova Scotia, this list here is all the different regulations that we would be in charge of enforcing. We have WHMIS, occupational diving, blasting safety, occupational safety general regulations, underground mining, violence, smoke-free workplaces. But the one I'd like to draw your attention to here is the workplace health and safety regulations, which are somewhat new, but the intent of these regulations will be to one day include all of these separate regulations into one, so that people in Nova Scotia wouldn't have to navigate various regulations. We'll just simply refer to one. So currently for short, we call it the WHISR, the Workplace Health and Safety Regulation, will include anything to do with administrative penalties, first aid regulation, fall protection, scaffolding, as well as temporary workplaces on highways. But as I explained, in time, all of these will soon be included within that overall regulation. Now, the next slide I'm going to play, this is a short video. And Caitlin, I'm just going to ask you to confirm that the sound does work. In the event that it please let me know. This next video is a short video about the internal responsibility system. And this is really the key element of occupational health and safety. So I'm going to play this video. This is a video that we created internally, and hopefully this will provide some insight into what is the IRS.
We all have a responsibility to ensure workplaces are safe, whether you're an employer, supervisor.
Oh, sorry. Was everybody able to hear that?
Yep, we could hear it.
Okay, perfect.
Or worker. We're all on the same team, with different roles to ensure safe workplaces. So, what do you do if you see a health and safety issue or workplace hazard? Fix it if you can, report it if you can't, and always make sure safety is the top priority. Employers, you are like the team coach. And like all great coaches, you need a plan. Having a safety policy and program demonstrates that safety is a priority in your organization. Your plan provides the information that everyone needs to work safely at your place of business. You provide PPE, maintain equipment, machines, and materials. You also consult and cooperate with your organization's Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee, as required. Supervisors, you're the leaders on the ground, the team captains. It's your role to ensure everyone understands why safety is important. You assign work, give direction, offer training, inspect and investigate concerns, correct hazards within your control, and report hazards that are beyond your control. You also don't allow work to continue if hazards exist or have been reported. Employees, you are the hands-on of the job, the players on each shift. You know best when it comes to seeing and mitigating hazards within your control. To support your team, your role is to report a hazard if there is something that makes you feel unsafe. If you're not sure, consult with your Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee or a representative when you have questions, concerns, or insight. You have the best point of view on the field to identify safety issues. Safe workplaces are the most important outcome for everyone. Safety is everyone's business.
So that is a a short video to provide a quick overview on the internal responsibility system. So what is the IRS? And hopefully the video was able to illustrate that really more than anything, it's everyone shares in the responsibility of workplace safety. The important thing to remember is that responsibility is also based on each and every party's ability and authority to do something. So all that to say is, for example, a CEO or a manager or supervisor who's in a position perhaps to place an order to replace something broken, or has more degree or a greater degree of control over finances, would have a greater ability than, say, a laborer or somebody who has recently come to the position. So it's really about I guess, infusing responsibility based on your authority and ability to do so. The important thing about the internal responsibility system is that the system it's active across Canada. Each and every province's occupational health and safety framework is based on this internal responsibility system. And the important aspect in it is also it creates a framework for participation so that employees have an actual role to play in affecting safety in their workplace, but it also ensures that there's a communication system so that an employee, if they have questions, there's a way that they can address it, or there's a place that they can bring it to somebody's attention. But also it ensures that this system is continuous and that there's a reporting to the employee as well. So the employee will always know what the outcome is if a safety situation or concern arises. And finally, this is an important aspect as well, is that the safety branch, the Occupational Health and Safety Division, does not make workplaces safe. As I explained earlier, it's for a long time there was this understanding that an officer's role would be to come in and to effect whatever changes are required. While they do have the powers to do that, what their job is to support the working of the internal responsibility system within the workplace. So what that means is that it's really the responsibility and the duty of the workplace parties to ensure safety, and where they require clarification or assistance to do so, the division will gladly come in and help support that. Now, for the next sections here, we're going to discuss some of the responsibilities and duties under the Occupational Health and Safety Act and how they are assigned to different workplace parties. So in the Act itself, there is many various parties, anything from the employer to the employee, owners, suppliers, each of which have a very specific responsibility. For the sake of the discussion here today, I've chosen the three that I think are most relevant to the farming community, which is the requirements under Section 13 for the employer, the requirements under Section 17 for the employee, and finally that of the owner of the farm. And understand that the owner isn't always necessarily the employer. Oftentimes, the owner will just be will be a silent partner, but they still have a certain degree of responsibility because the owner of the land or the property is in the best position to report and to deal with certain hazards, as we'll see in the next slides. So I'm just going to explore each and every one of these entities individually and just discuss some of the responsibilities and the duties that they have. So we're going to start off with employers. Now, Section 13 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act will establish all of these duties and requirements. Again, the employers must ensure the health and safety of everyone at or near the workplace. They have some precautions that are laid out very clearly. They have to, of course, ensure the health and safety at the workplace. They have to provide and maintain equipment, machines, and tools that are properly equipped with safety devices, provide safety instruction and training to the employees, ensure the employees are familiar with hazards in the workplace, which is part of the orientation as part of the onboarding process to ensure that communication happens, that they're aware of any hazards that could hurt them, and to ensure that employees are not exposed to health and safety hazards. That the most obvious one being, perhaps physical hazards, but that can extend to chemical hazards, environmental hazards, anything and everything that could be a potential risk to the employee. Now, in terms of the duties, the requirements of the employer under the Act, the primary one is to cooperate with the Health and Safety Committee and and or the representatives. So again, we're going to discuss a little bit when a joint occupational health and safety committee is required versus when a safety representative is required. So when those exist in the workplace, the employer must cooperate with those entities because they are part of the internal responsibility system, but also to cooperate with any representatives of the Department of Labor, Skills, and Immigration, mainly the occupational health and safety officers. And we're going to discuss that a little bit more, what to anticipate if an OSH officer were to come and inspect your business or your firm. Also, the duty, of course, is to comply with the Occupational Health and Safety Act, because that is a legal requirement, it's a statute, it's a law in Nova Scotia, so it's not something that any business can opt out of, as well as the regulations that specifically impact their business. And finally, to develop an occupational health and safety policy and program where required. And this is something we'll discuss as well. There are requirements in terms of the size of your farm and the size of your business that will trigger when you'll need a safety policy and when you'll need a safety program. This next section, we're going to just quickly look at the requirements or the responsibilities for employees and owners. Now, Section 17 deals specifically with employees. And again, they must take precautions to ensure the health and safety of others and themselves. So it's not just about protecting myself, but it's also protecting other employees at or near the workplace. So the primary requirement is to cooperate with the committee and safety representatives. This language is very common throughout everybody's responsibilities. So the idea is to ensure that they can tap into this communication method, but also to ensure that all protective devices, equipment, and their clothing are properly used. The importance of the employee cannot be understated because, of course, typically they are the first line of contact with the hazards, and they're often in the best position to ensure that these protective devices or the equipment are being used in an adequate manner. And if there is something wrong with them, they're in the best position to report it to the supervisor or the owner or somebody who's in a position to effect the necessary changes. Now, the owners, as I mentioned earlier, the owner is not necessarily the employer. Often they are the same, they are one and the same, but not always. And for the purpose of argument, we're just going to assume, let's say the owner, is some entity located either elsewhere in the province, but doesn't deal with the day-to-day requirements of the day-to-day operations of the business. But the owner still has a responsibility to ensure that the land or premises being used as a workplace is maintained in compliance with the Act. And part of this, an important aspect of this, is sharing information with the employer of the workplace to ensure that the health and safety of the employees is guaranteed. And the best way to do that is by identifying, eliminating, or controlling hazards. So I think in the context of a farm, the best example would be identifying unsafe structures or abandoned wells. If there's anything that, if there's any hazards or information that the owner is aware of, they automatically must provide that and transfer that knowledge information to the employer. Now, these next few slides, we're going to discuss some of the administrative requirements that come with operating a business here in Nova Scotia. We're going to talk a little bit about the safety policy. We're going to talk about the safety program, but we're also going to talk about some of the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee requirements and what those look like. So in Nova Scotia, if you have 5 or more employees who are regularly employed, then as the employer, you must prepare a written occupational health and safety policy, and you must review it at least annually. Now, again, this only applies in situations where you have 5 or more employees that you are legally required to have it. That being said, I understand from some of the materials produced by Farm Safety Nova Scotia that they definitely urge, if not support or promote the farming community preparing a safety policy, even if you have less than 5 employees. You won't be held to that if you have less, but it's often a good method of due diligence to show that you have turned your mind to some of these issues and that you're committed to ensuring health and safety on your work site. So what are the requirements for a policy? They're quite simple, and we have lots of examples of what a safety policy would look like. It's generally somewhat high level, but I'm just going to go over some of the requirements that every policy must contain. Again, it'll start with the reasons for commitment to health and safety. the commitment of the employer to cooperate with employees in pursuing occupational health and safety, and finally, the responsibilities of the employers, supervisors, and other employees in fulfilling the required commitment. So again, it doesn't really specify anything technical or detailed. It's more a general overview to show and demonstrate the commitment of the employer to occupational health and safety on their site. Now, in situations where the employer has 20 or more employees who are regularly employed, you have to create what we call an occupational health and safety program. Now, this document is a little bit more involved. And again, this is only triggered in a situation where you have 20 or more regular employees. If that is the case, then you will create what you call the safety program, which can be it's unique to your business, so no two safety programs should be identical, but there are certain requirements that any and all safety programs should contain, and these are all listed under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. I'm just going to go over what those are. So the program should talk about training and supervision. It should outline written work procedures that are related to health and safety. So again, a work procedure is specific to a particular procedure. So if it's something that could be inherently hazardous, or that there is a concern there's a concern among the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee or the safety representatives that this might require a written work procedure. Written work procedure is just will tell the employee exactly how to perform that operation in a safe manner. Now, the program will also call for the requirement of a Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee because the numbers of employees has been triggered. But it'll also talk about a hazard identification system, which will typically be in the form of daily inspections or regular inspections. It'll also talk about an accident investigation system, which could be fairly generic, but it's just to ensure that employees know that there is a system in place for investigating accidents or incidents in the event that they occur, which is also a requirement of the employer. And finally, there are some requirements to maintain records and statistics, as well as you have to provide regular maintenance and monitoring of the program to ensure that it's actually functioning. So this graph here is taken from Farm Safety Nova Scotia. I thought it was very well done, and I think it really sort of explains all the elements of the program that need to be included in there. And again, I believe Farm Safety Nova Scotia does have some examples of these programs, but again, the division also has some that we'd be happy to share if there's any, if that could be of value or help to anybody looking to prepare a program. So next, we're going to speak a little bit about Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committees, as well as safety representatives. The committees, again, these only come into play in the context where a business has more than 20 employees who are regularly employed. And I think that the definition for regularly employed is that they've worked there for more than 4 weeks. So if that is a situation, but it can also occur where the executive director of the division requires it. So even if you have less than 20 employees, but there are situations where perhaps employees are not able to communicate their needs, the director of the OSH division does have the authority to kind of to make the employer create a JOSH committee for that particular business. But again, this is a responsibility of the employer where they have 20 or more employees. Now, the health and safety representative is essentially the same, well, has the same function as the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee, except it's just one individual. And this is a requirement when a business has anywhere from 5 to 19 employees. And again, or in a situation where the executive director deems that it's necessary, they can order the appointment of a safety representative. But it's automatic where you have between 5 and 19 employees, but sorry, more than 5, less than 20. And again, this is the employer's responsibility to cause an employee to basically to be selected. So the employer cannot select the employee. It's up to the employees to designate their safety representatives, but the employer still has that responsibility to ensure that somebody has been designated and is officially designated. And the reason I'll explain when it comes to the posting requirements why that's important, because all employees on your work site or at the business should know who their health and safety representative is or who the members of the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee are, so that they can contact them if they have any questions or concerns related to their health and safety. So this next slide is just going to kind of give a very broad overview of some of the requirements or the functions of the committee, and all of these are kind of outlined in the Act. But just for your reference, you know, some of the things that these committees are responsible for, or the safety representative, would be, as part of the program, to help with the identification of hazards. So this, you know, as the employer tries to develop the program and some of the procedures related to their business, this is where there is so much value in having the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee come in and assist with that function, as well as the auditing of compliance with health and safety requirements. So again, they are sort of the internal group of working minds when it comes to health and safety. They will be involved with investigation of complaints. So again, we're going to discuss this a little bit more when it comes to employee rights, especially specifically around the right to refuse. If, depending on the situation, the JOSH committee or the health and safety representative could have a very important role to play in determining that. As well, they will be required to participate with inspections. If a safety officer attends at the work site, one of the first things that they will ask for is that the presence of a member of the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee or the safety representative will accompany them during the inspections. As well, they will provide advice on individual protective devices, equipment, and clothing. They will advise the employer. And again, they will help, as I mentioned before, they'll help investigate work refusals. So as a summary, you know, why is this important? Because as we saw earlier, the internal responsibility system creates a system in which everybody is responsible to the extent of their ability and authority to do so. But it also creates a system of communication to allow each employee to promote their voice or to bring their voice or concern to either the safety representative or to the JOSH committee, so that it can be escalated and dealt with in a proper manner. So again, they're critical to the checks and balances to ensure that both aspects, from the employer's perspective and the employee's perspective, are heard and dealt with equally. They're key in identifying hazards because you know, a lot of them, the JOSH committees will be made up of an equal number of representatives from the employer's side and from the employee side. So both of them are able to kind of bring their expertise to identifying and controlling hazards. And again, the JOSH committee and the health and safety representatives serve as a sort of, like I said, somewhat of a brain trust or a safety advisory system. They're not necessarily, they will not be the group who will actually put those safety requirements in place. They're not the ones that'll go out and place the guards on the machinery where required. However, they will be the group that will receive these complaints or concerns. They will turn their mind to, and they'll come up with a report or a conclusion for the employer that will assist them in making that decision. So they're not the doers. They are, I'd say, more the advisors when it comes to health and safety. Now, this next slide is just, there's been some recent changes. I'm sure many of you might be already familiar with them, but it's just around accident reporting. And I know there was a question in the past about, you know, when are we required to report to the Occupational Health and Safety Division if there is an incident or an accident that takes place on the work site. So again, these amendments were made in June of 2017, and there were a couple other changes that had to do with the director's executive powers, but when it came to accident reporting, these were the main changes. Well, first of all, I should say, if there's ever a, you know, heaven forbid, if there's a fatality, if there's on any work site, then automatically the first call is to, after ambulance and 911, obviously, is a division. Serious injuries. Now, I think this is where the changes were made. They were around defining what constitutes a serious injury. I won't read the list to you, but you'll see there that these are These are injuries that are significant. I think the definition is as one that will endanger life or cause permanent injury. So anything from unconsciousness, a fracture of the skull, third-degree burns, loss of sight, this will trigger an automatic reporting to the safety division within 24 hours. Similarly, serious incidents as opposed to injury, these are situations where it wouldn't involve loss of limb or life or injury to a person, but it could be significant property destruction or impact on the materials of the business. So it could be an accidental explosion. It could be a structural failure or collapse, a release of hazardous substances, or also a fall from heights, but where the fall protection was activated. So nobody was injured, but it still constitutes a serious incident for the purpose of reporting it to the division. So now that we've sort of dealt with accident reporting, that's sort of those are in the worst case scenario. I just wanted to talk a little bit about occupational health and safety officers' inspections. And this is the next slide here is going to be a short video which the division created internally. And it's just going to sort of explain what to expect when an officer inspects your work site. After the video, I'm going to discuss some of the powers under the Act that the officers have to use, but I think for the most part, the video should be self-explanatory. I do want to make a point of saying that when the division created this video, they made it they made it a point of not wanting to hire actors. So the two officers that you see are actual health and safety officers with the division, and they are still working with us. So there's a good chance that you may see them one day. So without further ado, I'm going to play the video for you.
Workplace safety is vital to every business. The requirements to operate a safe workplace can be different between businesses, and the Occupational Health and Safety Division of the Safety Branch is here to help. Safety officers visit businesses all over the province in all industry sectors to help inform employers and employees about workplace safety. Their job is to ensure Nova Scotia workers are healthy and safe while working. The officers are trained in many areas, including the law as it pertains to the workplaces, proper work practices, and investigative skills. So what should you expect when an OHS officer comes to visit? Let's find out.
Hi, my name is Officer Jennifer Bolivar.
And I'm David Begmin. We are from the Occupational Health and Safety Division of Nova Scotia.
Our role is to come into your workplace to help you achieve compliance with the Nova Scotia Occupational Health and Safety Act and regulations. As a safety officer, I am tasked to protect the rights of workers and encourage cooperation between management and staff by educating them in how to identify, assess, and control potential workplace hazards. Safe workplaces help reduce workplace accidents and minimize business losses. This can increase your bottom line.
If there is any safety concern, we will visit to inspect. By law, we can randomly show up and make sure everything is in compliance.
When I arrive, I identify myself to the business owner or representative on site, as well as a worker representative. We all have a discussion about why I'm here, if there are complaints, or if there are any safety issues they would like me to have reviewed. As occupational health and safety officers, we have a keen eye for safety. That's our specialty. Some of the things we are on the lookout for are safety signage, personal protective equipment, policies, procedures, safety education, and safety regimes. We may also work with employers to establish a well-functioning joint occupational health and safety committees. When I'm done, we all meet to go over my findings. I outline what I have seen and any changes required.
If there are issues on site, we can help make a plan with an employer to bring them into compliance. For some employers, no changes are needed. For others, it can be minor tweaks in how they operate. And for some, it can be a culture shift and revamping of how they conduct their business to ensure workplace safety is their priority.
As safety officers, if non-compliance issues are noticed at the workplace, we can issue warnings, orders, administrative penalties, summary offense tickets, or you can be charged under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. However, all this can be avoided through a positive safety culture at the workplace.
In extreme situations, the employer may have to work with legal representatives to remedy scenarios. And in dangerous cases, we will order equipment to be shut down or business operations to stop. These cases are rare, but know that our role is to ensure employee safety is always the top priority. This all may seem overwhelming to employers, but it's important that you need to know that we are here to help you to improve and ensure your workplace safety conditions meet the safety standards set forth by the province. This goal benefits both your employees and you. Happy, safe employees are more productive, have less downtime, and have fewer incidents that could affect a business financially. Ultimately, our goal is to ensure employees can do their job safely and at the end of their shift, go home free of injuries. Work safe, home safe every day.
For any questions and concerns,
Or to find out how to reach us to help you achieve your workplace safety goals,
contact us anytime.
All right. So that video it provides a bit of an illustration as to how an inspection with an occupational health and safety officer would take place. Just as a quick introduction, safety officers under the Act have quite broad powers in terms of entering different workplaces, but they inspect for different reasons. There can be an inspection which is the result of a complaint where a worker or any workplace party would contact the safety division to report a hazard. This can be done anonymously. And the officer would respond. They would never identify the person who made the call, and they would go through the exact same process outlined there, where they'd get a representative from the employer as well as the employee before they conduct their inspection. That would be what we'd call kind of a complaint-driven inspection. However, for the most part, they'd conduct what we call ad hoc inspections. Each officer would have their area, and they'd be responsible for that particular area. So it can be just a randomly selecting a particular business for inspection. It could be part of a targeted inspection, perhaps looking at certain businesses, whether it's manufacturing, construction, and they'd be inspecting those businesses specifically. But again, they don't. This is not something that they need to call ahead to report. They can show up and conduct their inspections at any time. So again, just a quick overview of some of the powers and authorities of a safety officer. They are specifically designated under the Act, so they're given very specific powers. And those powers are used obviously to ensure compliance with the Act and regulations. During the course of an inspection, what they can do are issue compliance orders. As part of those compliance orders, they can request a production of records or documents. It can be anything. It can be specific to a piece of machinery. It could be perhaps a procedure. They could request a copy of the program. Anything that an officer would feel helpful to ensure that the business is meeting their safety requirements or their regulatory requirements. Again, the officers can also take photographs or recordings, whether it is for themselves or for the report, but also to show the employer what it is that they saw, so that as they're having the debrief with the employer, it'll give the employer a better sense what the issues are. And again, as part of their authorities, they can issue warnings, which is they're not. I guess it's for situations where the compliance would be very easy to fix. However, if it's imminent harm or if there's a real potential of harm, then they would typically issue a compliance order, which is an official direction from the Occupational Health and Safety Division to rectify that particular situation. Again, in addition to that, they do have powers to issue what we call administrative penalties, which I guess would be more like speeding tickets, presumably, but it's more if they need to direct change automatically. If they come to a work site and they're seeing, clear violations, they can issue a ticket at that point in time. But in addition to compliance orders, administrative penalties, they can also issue what we call summary offense tickets, as well as if it's a situation where an incident happened or if there was a fatality. They also have authority under the Act to issue what we call long form informations, which is also a prosecution. And I believe the punishable time under the Act is, I think, up to a maximum of 2 years incarceration, and I forget the exact penalty amounts. But they do have broad powers, and it's, again, everything is listed in great detail under the Act, what they can and cannot do. So I'm going to transition now over to some of the duties and responsibilities of workplace parties. And I'm going to start off by a short video. It's only approximately 1 minute long, and it's taken from BC, but it does cover the same 3 rights and responsibilities as apply to workers here in Nova Scotia.
As a worker, you have 3 basic rights. The first is the right to know. Your employer has the responsibility to tell you about the hazards on the worksite. These may be hazards in jobs that you're doing, or they may be hazards in jobs that somebody else is doing on the worksite. Nevertheless, if you're exposed to them, your employer has the responsibility of telling you, and you have the right to know. If you're not sure what's happening, if you're not sure what you're supposed to do, ask questions. You also have the right to speak up. If you're uncertain of a task that's been assigned to you, if you're unsure of how to use a piece of equipment, it is your right to speak up, to ask for the proper training, to ask for your employer to show you, and to be given the opportunity to demonstrate that you know how to do something before you're asked to do it alone. As a worker, you also have the right to refuse. If you're asked to do something which you know is unsafe, if you're asked to do something for which you haven't received the proper training, then you have the right to refuse that work and to refuse it without being penalized. You also have responsibilities, and these responsibilities include following safe work procedures that have been outlined for you, asking for training, using personal protective equipment, either which you have provided yourself or which an employer has provided for you, and identifying if there are hazards that you've seen. No paycheck is worth getting hurt for.
Okay, so that was a great summary from BC about the 3 rights of workers, and we're just going to go over them briefly over the next few slides. So the first one is the right to know. Every employee has a right to know issues that affect their health and safety in the workplace. They have a right to know the safety hazards, as well as what procedures or controls have been put in place by the employer. They have a right to access information. This can be information about a particular piece of equipment, such as the manufacturer's specifications, but could also be information around the inspection conducted by an occupational health and safety officer and what those findings were. They also have a right to access training that is specific to the job to ensure that it's being conducted safely. Next is the right to participate. And again, this is a fundamental right because it ensures that every workplace party is involved in the health and safety of their workplace. So again, every employee, if they have more than 20 employees working at that workplace, they have a right to join the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee. If it's between 5 and 20 employees, or 5 and 19, then they can apply or put the name forward as being a health and safety representative. As well, in terms of the right to participate, it also gives them the authority and ability to report unsafe conditions to their supervisor, as well as any issues that they deem relevant or impacting their health and safety. Now, the third right is the right to refuse, and this is a very, very, very important right. However, it's not a unlimited right. There are some contexts and there are some important conditions that need to be remembered when exercising the right to refuse. So an employee can exercise the right to refuse where they feel that a particular task or work is unsafe or the work conditions are unsafe. However, there is before I go into the refusal procedure, I just want to say there are 2 exceptions where an employee cannot exercise the right to refuse. It's where if they're exercising their right to refuse would impact another employee. And secondly, there are certain positions where the danger is inherent in the work, and I think those are specifically excluded. A good example of that would be firefighters or police officers, where the danger is inherent to their is inherent to their work, but they also receive very specific training in terms of dealing with those hazards. So that's not a situation that they could exercise their right to refuse. However, if an employee that's not in those particular exemptions. If an employee wishes to exercise their right to refuse, then the first person they have to report it to is their immediate supervisor. The supervisor, or the person supervising them, has to know exactly what the issue is. In the event that that supervisor, feels that the work is safe or that there's no concern, they would tell the employee to go back to work. If the employee is still unhappy with the supervisor's finding, they can bring their concern up to the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee or the safety representative, who would then investigate the work refusal. They would look at the piece of equipment or the procedure as a whole, and they themselves would come up with a recommendation of whether or not the employee should return to work or what needs to be done to fix it in a way that is satisfactory based on the regulations and the requirements of the Act. But again, if the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee is satisfied that this is not a dangerous operation, the employee still has the ability to contact the department itself. They can place a call directly to Nova Scotia Department of Labour, Skills and Immigration, and an officer would attend. However, what it's important to mention is the fact that whereas an employee may contact the department at any given time and potentially skip steps 1 and 2, as we explained before, the role of the division is to support the internal responsibility system. And the internal responsibility system requires that the parties who are in a position to impact change be made aware of that. And the first person would be the supervisor as well as the employer. So the officer may attend, and they would seize the investigation and deal with it, but they would also ensure that the supervisor is made aware, as well as the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee. So this next slide here, this is taken again from Farm Safety's publication. I thought it was very well done, but it explains the processes for a work refusal. Now, the last it's sometimes is deemed a right to grieve, but here in Nova Scotia, we know it's referred to as a discriminatory action complaint. And this is important to discuss because what it does is it protects those 3 rights: the right to refuse, the right to participate, and the right to know. And essentially what it says is if an employer were to exercise those rights or to take any action in the furtherance of safety, that they have certain protections, as long as it's done in the context of ensuring safety in the workplace. So good examples would be, an employee's wish to participate in a joint occupational safety committee or as a safety representative, or exercising the right to refuse work, or if they brought forward a safety concern to the supervisor, if they did anything safety related, which then resulted in disciplinary action to them. So if an employer were to either not schedule them for next shift or give them a position or work that is perhaps below their qualifications. If there was any form of retaliation for an employee choosing to exercise one of their statutory rights, then this would trigger what we call the protections under Section 45. So if the employee were to be aggrieved, say if they got fired because they felt that they exercised this right, they could then contact the division, and an officer would attend and would do a full investigation. They would likely interview the employees as well as the employer and everybody related to this particular incident. And some of the powers that the officers have, they can order the employee return to work. That typically doesn't happen because once termination, the employee generally doesn't want to return to work. But they do have several powers under that. They can order back pay and several other options. But again, this is specific to a context where an employee chose to exercise their right and was unfairly punished for doing so. So it's a very limited situation, but the idea is that every workplace party in Nova Scotia should know that they have inherent protections that come with these rights. Now, this next part is about posting requirements and communication. And I guess this is somewhat of a rhetorical question, but I guess the question is, where would be a good place to find information about occupational health and safety in your workplace? And really the question is more addressed to workers. And I'll give you the answer. The answer generally is your workplace occupational health and safety board. Sometimes it can also include, if it's such as road construction, if it's a mobile workplace, perhaps the They'll have a caravan or a trailer, which would also kind of serve as an occupational health and safety board. And the idea is that there's certain key information that needs to be available to all employees at all time. And this is information related to their health and safety. So what you see in front of you is also taken from the Farm Safe Nova Scotia publication, and is very specific to the information required on a farm. So at a minimum, farms or farming enterprises are required to have a copy of the Occupational Health and Safety Act posted or made available electronically. So if you're in a rural area that doesn't have access to Wi-Fi or doesn't have access to the internet, then as long as you have an electronic copy on a computer or somewhere where the employee can access it. Ideally, though, a copy should be posted if they have any questions or concerns about certain areas of the law. Again, the contact information for the Department of Labor, Skills and Immigration, which is 1-800-9-LABOR. Again, where it's required, again, it's only legally required if you have 5 or more employees. But again, I know there's been a strong suggestion to have a safety policy even if you have less than 5. That would be something you'd post on the safety board. You'd include any orders, compliance notices, deviations, anything that was issued by the Department of Labor. So if there was an inspection and you had a safety and inspection report, all of that would be posted on the board so that employees could get access to it and read it. You'd also want to make sure that they're posting the names and the contact information of the Health and Safety Committee or the representatives. Again, they serve that critical function as the communication, the back and forth. So any employee who might have a concern or a question, they may not necessarily feel comfortable bringing that to the attention of their supervisor. So they should also be able to know who their representatives are so that they can always have that conversation either privately or bring it to before one of their safety meetings. Again, also copies of the minutes from the meetings. If there is a joint occupational health and safety committee, whenever they meet, which is typically monthly, they will take minutes, and those will also need to be posted on the safety board. Now, again, this is some additional information that might be applicable to farms. Again, it's specific. This isn't a statutory requirement, but it's definitely actually some of them might be, but generally it's something that most farms would also include. The location of first aid supplies, also who the first aid attendant is, so that an employee always knows where to go if there's an injury or an incident. Emergency information. So, again, I think this is just good business practice to have poison control, etc., available. The names of gases stored in portable gas cylinders. Again, this is an excellent requirement as well. The hoist rated load, maximum revolutions per minute of an abrasive wheel or grinder. Again, these are very specific to farm enterprises, but these are the types of hazards that I think employees in a farm setting would be most likely to encounter. Where they're very specific, it would be very good practice to have those posted as well. So finally, I'm just with a few slides that I have left here. I just want to go over some of the information and training resources that the Safety Division offers for free. And I think it's important for all businesses to know, not just businesses, but all workplace parties to know what these are and how to access them. So this slide here is just a copy of our website, which is up here. And you'll see if you go to the worksite, we do have several occupational health and safety courses which are available for free. We have a license with the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety, and we provide up to a maximum of 5 courses for free for each year. So all you have to do is be a resident of Nova Scotia, and you can access these five free courses directly through our website. We have, I think there's 23 different online courses that are offered, and then you can take up to a maximum of 5 per year. I also want to mention when it comes to WHMIS, I think WHMIS was initially hosted on a different website, but it's recently been converted or moved to Skills Online. Again, it's available for free to residents of Nova Scotia through Skills Online Nova Scotia. So that's the website to go to get access to the free WHMIS training. Finally, I have to share some of our contact information. Again, the best way to contact the branch, again, is 1-800-9-LABOR. If you have any workplace safety issues or concerns, again, we also have our website and our email, which is available. The 1-800-9-LABOR is a confidential information service line, and it is being monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So, and the calls and the voice messages are dealt with by priority. So if there's a situation of, if it's an incident or an injury, obviously that would be that would receive immediate priority. Now, finally, I just wanted to share some of our websites and information where you can find further information. This is our website here. We work with workplace WCB, the Workers' Compensation Board, and they also they have some excellent resources available on their website as well if there's any further need there. Apparently, we recently have a Twitter account. I myself don't operate it, but it is available if anybody is looking for more information there. So my presentation is for the most part done. I just have about three or four more slides, which basically are a quick safety quiz. And if it's okay with everybody, I'm just going to go through them very quickly. These questions are quite simple. And if anybody's comfortable, please feel free to just say the answer out loud. So my the first question here, and this is just more of a refresher, just to kind of go over some of the information that we discussed today. So just a quick overview. What are the 3 rights of all employees in Nova Scotia? Is it, you can just say A, B, C, or D? Is the right to participate, anticipate, and act, the right to work, no dangers, refuse to work, refuse unsafe work, get paid and participate? Is it the right to no dangers, refuse unsafe work, and participate in making your workplace safe?
Just a note, I made everyone now able to talk if they would like to.
Excellent, thank you.
I cannot guarantee that people will want to.
No worries, no worries. So in this case, yes, the answer is you have the right to know your dangers, to refuse unsafe work, and to participate in making your workplace safe. Next one is, if you see this situation happening in your workplace where you have an extension cord, there's clearly fire going on, it's somewhat of a precarious situation, how would you handle it? Do you ignore it? Do you report it to a supervisor? Do you keep working and pretend that you don't see it? Or do you try to fix it yourself? The answer in this situation, be reported to a supervisor. And the reason is that obviously we can't ignore it. We are, each and everybody is responsible for their own health and safety and those of their peers and their colleagues. So we can't ignore it. We can't keep working and pretend we didn't see it. And the danger of trying to fix it yourself is, unless I have a background in electrical engineering, I may not have the competencies to fix that myself, in addition to the fact that there's an open flame and it could be quite dangerous. So I think if it's an immediate risk, then obviously you get the fire suppressant, but otherwise you would report it to the supervisor immediately. Now, question 3 is similar, but I think hopefully we'll kind of we'll apply this point a little bit more. So if you see the spill on the floor, what would you do? And you can select all that apply. Do you place a sign to warn the coworkers? Do you find the source of the spill or the leak? Do you get a mop and clean it up? Or do you ignore it and keep working?
A and B.
Very good. No, that's good. That's very good thinking. And I think what this question sort of wants us to think about is, let's go back to that to the IRS, and what do we as employees or as as frontline staff have the ability and authority to do? So in this case, the answer would be all 3 of the above. I have the ability to place that sign. That's well within my means and authority. As long as I'm not destructively ripping out drywall, I think I can, for the most part, find the source of the spill. Maybe it's just a simple fix. Maybe I can just there's something I could fix. So as long as it's not too complicated, I definitely would have the ability to find the source of that spill. And again, how hard would it be for me to get the mop and clean it? Is that something that I need to elevate to my supervisor and above them? No, not necessarily. I have the ability and authority to control this hazard. So this is something that I'd probably be able to fix myself. So for this next one, if you've been injured, and this is more from the perspective of an employee, but what are the 3 steps that you would take? Do you cry, complain, and then report it to WCB? Do you get first aid, report it to your supervisor, and then fill out the WCB Form 7 report? Do you hide it, don't say anything, and then just quit? Or do you get first aid, report it to your supervisor, and then go right home?
E.
Excellent. Absolutely. Yeah. So the first thing, of course, get first aid right away. If you don't know where to get it, then you should know who your first aid attendees are on your workplace. You should also know where your first aid kit is. So immediately treat the injury, report it to the supervisor. Again, as part of the IRS, it's important that the supervisor know what hazards or issues you've encountered so that they can immediately address it and control that risk so that nobody else is injured. And of course, you have that requirement to fill out the WCB report, the Form 7 report, where where the employer has workplace compensation coverage. Last question is, what are health and safety committee meetings for? Is it so that you can get a free lunch? Is it to get a nice break from work? Is it to talk about safety concerns and solutions? Or just so that the operations can say that they follow the law and they have some minutes to show?
E, all of the above.
Well, as much as a nice lunch, a nice free lunch would be nice, in this case, the primary reason or the only reason is to talk about safety concerns and solutions. So it's, as we explained, the safety committees, the JOSH or the safety representative, they have an important function as for communication. It allows the coming together of both the employer and the employee perspective. And they have, as we saw in the program, they have very important functions, whether it's around determining which PPE is adequate in particular situations, helping to establish safe work procedures. Those are the kinds of tasks that a committee should be dealing with during their monthly meetings. And that will bring me to the end of my presentation. So if it's okay, I'm going to stop sharing just so that we can open the floor.
We do have one question in Sterling. So who can make a complaint? Is it anonymous, and how do you do it?
That's an excellent question. Yes, anybody can contact the OSH division. And as we like to say, we want your information, not your name. So if, say, I'll use myself an example. If I'm on a work site and I see something that's inherently dangerous, whether perhaps I don't have the right PPE, perhaps I don't have the right training to do the task, whatever that is. Under the IRS, I should bring that to the attention of my supervisor, and they would be, we'd have that discussion, and they would ensure that my needs are met. The reality, however, unfortunately, is for different reasons, not every employee is comfortable doing that. So it's important that the employee be able to contact the safety division. So when they would call that 1-800-9-LABOR, it would simply be they'd call in and say, I have a safety concern. I work at this in this location. The person, they may or may not ask for your name. The information specialist who's answering the call may or may not ask for your name. The name is not important, and when the officer will attend at the work site to investigate the complaint, all they will really say is, we received a call saying that there was a safety concern. They will never say who it was, the gender, anything that would identify the person, and they would proceed as they normally would with an inspection and ask for a representative from both both the employer and the employee to conduct it. So, if the person calling in the complaint wishes to leave their contact information, if only to get a follow-up call to know that their concern was addressed, they have every right to do so. Of course, as we mentioned, when an inspection occurs, the officer will leave an inspection report with the employer, which they then in turn will post on the safety board, so that whoever that employee is would also be able to read that and to see that that their concern was reported and how it was investigated and what the outcomes or the controls were needed to deal with it. So in answer to your question, anybody from the workplace can call. It's the information, it's not the name. Nobody's going to be asking you to provide any information that the person's not comfortable with.
Someone else has asked if they can get a copy of the slides. So we are recording this webinar and we will post it on the Farm Safety YouTube channel. However, are we able to get maybe the slides in a PDF for people who don't want to be pausing the video?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so I will send those out to those who are on the call. We don't have any more questions that I can see. However, you are all now able to ask questions and unmute yourself. I will say though, Sterling, you mentioned the WMIS, and so Farm Safety offers the WMIS for free as well, but we do offer it in Spanish. So for any employer who has foreign workers coming in that Spanish is their first language, we have the WMIS course available in Spanish on our Skills Pass platform, or reach out to Farm Safety and we can help you access that for your employees.
Excellent.
Seeing nothing else, I think we're done. So thank you very much, Sterling, for all of that information. Anyone has any follow-up questions, they can certainly send them to the info@Farm Safety email and we will get them to Sterling and get you an answer. Otherwise, thank you all for attending.
Thank you very much for having me, Caitlin, and thank you everybody for your attention today.